Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's device management interface call. Thanks for joining. As usual, the call will be recorded and shared on YouTube, so please be mindful of whatever you share with everybody. Use the usual caution on whatever is discussed. So today I wanted to just want to start with an overview of the JIRA review of what's going on, what's in progress, what has been done. Then I know there is a discussion over the name versus the UUID in the modifiable component. So by looking at JIRA, I know that there's a couple of things that have been merged. One is this events recovery from failures is being merged. So that's actually done. Right, Amit?
Yes, it's already in resolved state, right?
Oh, okay. No, not sure.
I changed it just now.
Oh, you just changed it. Okay. Loaded it a few minutes ago. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that was done. That's thanks to Amit. That was done. Do you want to go over a little bit of what changes you made?
Yeah, so basically for some of the events that are coming which report a failure, once the failure ceases, we missed putting in an event saying that, okay, this failure is not there anymore. So for example, if the temperature goes above some thresholds, right, once it comes back to its normal levels, there should be an event saying that, okay, it's come back, right? So similarly for other failures. So that's what I introduced in this patch set.
Okay, sounds good. The other one I know you worked on was this one, the start managing device with a modifiable component.
Yeah, this basically was a bug because what we were passing was the entire hardware there, right? And we shouldn't be passing that. We should be passing only the modifiable component, right? With the fields set to whatever is needed for starting to manage the device. So the important fields in that case would be the name that you want to assign to this hardware, right?
Yeah.
And the URI, which would contain the IP address of the hardware. So these are the two important things which we need to start managing the device. And the hardware structure is a huge structure which contains the entire inventory. We don't need to pass that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine by me. I also know you have another patch open, which I just want somebody else to +1. It looks good to me. There was a little bit of back and forth regarding the license. I've done that. So do you want to go over what you introduced here?
Yeah, this is just a documentation of the device management API. So basically, what I've highlighted here is the same thing, that the first API that you need to call is the start managing device. And then the other APIs that are there in that service, which is get the physical inventory and get a hardware component info as an information about a particular hardware component. And in cases where you could modify certain attributes of a component, we have the set hardware component info as well. So I've just documented that. So yeah, people could go through this. If you need any clarifications, you could always open a Jira and I could address them. Or you could, I know this call might not have given enough time, right, for anyone to review it. But after the call, you could always review it and get back to me with whatever comments you have, and I could address them.
Yeah, I think reviewing it whenever anybody has any time, that would be much appreciated. I'll wait for another +1. It looks good to me, but I'll wait for another +1 to merge it. Yes.
Yeah, so as I was doing this one, the documentation, one thing struck me is that, see, right now we have a start managing device, but we don't have a stop managing device. Would we need that?
Possibly, yes. I think we actually.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry. Yes.
that's a valid concern.
Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely create a Jira ticket for that. And yeah, I think it's just going to be the opposite, the parallel to start managing device. I think you can pass either the UUID. It should be enough.
Yeah, we just need to pass the UUID. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good to me. I also know that according to the discussion we had last week, you're working on the documentation for the image update.
Yeah, this is in progress. Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea is that, again, just for everybody, we keep the stream in the RPC, but we also require the implementation to put an event on Kafka. And for those of you who weren't here last week, it was decided to do it like this to get the benefits of the gRPC request response, but also keep the valuable resiliency and failover properties of using the bus, and also many subscribers to the event. We still assume that the main operator on that device is going to be the one that calls the start downloading image and all of those calls. But if that goes away, with the device management component putting the event to Kafka, you could still have somebody else coming in from the Kafka bus, reading that event and saying, oh, nobody acted on this event because the component that was there and was supposed to act on it died, so let me take action on it. So it's just a little bit more secure having it also on Kafka. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Perfect. So I think an upcoming patch for this will be coming from Amit in the next week or so, right? Next few days.
Yes, I'm currently working on it. So once the other one is merged, I hopefully would submit this one. I don't want too many parallel patches to be up there.
Yeah, I think that if they don't touch the same file, it's fine having multiple. But if they do touch the same file, I would advise to have just one from yourself. It's just easier for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just one question to the last one. I noticed there are two draw IO files and one PNG file in the commit. So
yeah, the draw.io file. The draw.io files are just the source from which the image files have been generated. So I push them in so that if you have to modify the image later on because of some changes, we always have that as a reference, right? So we could easily do the modifications to the images.
Okay, this sounds great, but there's only one PNG file. So are there?
So the other one is already there. So that I had pushed in last week, the events matrices.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I missed pushing in the draw.io then. So I pushed it as part of this commit.
Maybe it's not urgent, Amit, but maybe in a further patch, just move the images in a lower folder. Just, for cleaning, proper cleanup of the documentation folder. In the docs, you just keep the MD files, and then you have a docs-images, and in there you have everything else. This is my personal I like it better. So one thing
Okay.
is all the MD files and the images don't pollute what he's looking at. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Okay, and the draw.io files also inside the images folder?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Okay. So I saw that there was a discussion around the name versus UUID and the different usages. And that spawned out of the fact that in the modifiable component here, which is what we use and start managing device, as you can see from here. In here, we have this object, and this object actually has a read and write name on it, which is what we give to the device manager with this modifiable component. But then we expect the modifiable component, we expect the device manager to return a component with UUID. And that UUID needs to be unique across the system. So there was certain questions from you, Holger. Do you want to share it with everybody?
Yeah, sure. So my question was, and this I just noticed it when I read the new README, which Amit did and which was part of the review. So there was one command which actually has two. So as I understood it, when you create a device, you pass a name and you will get a UUID back, and then from this point on, you will always use the UUID. And also in all events and so on, you will only see the UUID. You will never see the name again, I guess. But then there's one command which I forgot. This is
yeah. So that would be the get component info or the set component info, either of the two.
Yeah, and this has UUID and name as input. Yeah. So, and I was confused. It's there. It was there. It's at the bottom.
It's in this file. Yeah. Yeah. So line number 61. If you go into the hardware component info get request. Yeah. So it has the component UUID as well as the component name, and that is the confusion that Holger brought up. That why do we? Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Why do we have both the UUID and the name? So, so if you look at the RFC says that the name is something which is unique, and the tree structure is based or created based on those names. So it's a flat tree structure with one root and all the components being children of that at the top level, and then there could be multiple other nested levels, right? And it says that the name is something that would be unique for each component within hardware, and also each component would have a UUID. And as we know, a UUID would be a universally unique identifier for each component. Now, why the spec has two of them or two attributes which uniquely identify a component, I'm not sure of that, because I couldn't find anything in the spec which gives the reasoning behind it. But the other thing that we notice is that the name is read-write, whereas the UUID is not read-write. So the UUID would have to be generated by, in most cases, the physical device itself. And in absence of that, the device manager would take care of generating the UUIDs. for a component and as well as for a device. The only requirement would be that the UUID should really identify a physical element, and so it should not change on restart of the component or device. So that is about the UUID and the name, right? How both of them crept in. So what we could have done is we could have kept only the name.
If I may intervene here, the other thing that I would say is that the name can be not unique outside of a single component, meaning that you could have fan 1 on 5 different devices, and that is a valid element, meaning that
that's correct. Yeah.
But then the UUID for those fans will be different. So that is the key difference to me, at least in how I read this, how I read the RFC.
Yes, you're correct. Yes. Yeah, so one is globally, universally unique. The other is unique within that hardware.
I mean, to add on to that, I mean, absolutely agree with you. That's the reasoning there. But the other thing is the UUID is effectively a database key, right? That's the key. The name is essentially an alias for human consumption because humans can't deal with UUIDs.
But I guess there's also something like an alias in the model, right? So there's also one attribute called alias.
There is an attribute called alias as well.
So it's confusing for me. I'm sorry.
I agree with David in the sense that the device manager should use the UUID really as the identifier of the object in its own database of things, but the name is what can also be used by higher systems without knowledge of that UUID. Sorry, Amit, please go ahead.
Yeah, so if I look up into the implementations, right? So for example, if I look up into the Redfish implementation that is already there in the old this importer where we go to the Hcore device and get some of this inventory, right? So there, what the manager uses to query things is basically a URI, right, or the path of the component, right? It reads something like whatever / something, and then Ethernet switch /1 / port Ethernet ports /0 or something like that, and that could very well be the name for that component. Right. So the UUID would be, basically what I'm trying to say is that from the device manager, when you actually go to the device, you can't use the UUID, at least the one implementation that I looked up on, which is Redfish. So Holger, you could speak about what implementation you have, right? So that's why I was thinking that maybe if the name itself carries the string with which the device manager is able to talk to the device, it makes things much more easier. The UUID of the component is there and it uniquely identifies it, and maybe Node-borne systems could make use of it. But but for the device manager, the name is something which it could really use to talk to the device, right? And make things much more simpler. The other option could be if we use the UUID on the device manager also, then it basically needs to maintain a mapping between the name, because that's what it is, name or whatever that string could be, to talk to the device. For each UUID, it has to maintain that mapping. right? And then it becomes, as in it becomes a little bit more complicated. It has to ensure that persistence is maintained for that mapping and everything else, right, along with that. So that's why I was thinking that, and because the spec also says that name is something which uniquely identifies a component. So maybe that is what we should use. But having the UUID along with that, right, would make life easier for the northbound systems who could be using that to index into their databases. I don't know if I'm making sense or I'm able to
I didn't quite follow that. When you said using the name as to carry information to connect to the device, could you give an example of what you mean by that?
So give me a second. Let me see if I have some of the traces. So yeah, give me a second. So okay, let me try sharing my screen. Maybe with this, it might be easier to explain. Let me know if my screen is
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so so if you look at this, right, I need to increase the font size. Right, so this is like some redfish query, right? Mm-hmm. So here, if you see that for a particular port, right, this is what the device manager would use on the curl request, right, redfish on that API to get information about that particular component. So in this case, this is a port on the Ethernet switch, right? So if this entire string is kept as the name, right, it makes things much more easier for the device manager, right?
Yeah, except then you've got API version in the name.
No, sorry.
Redfish v1.
Yeah. So okay.
Okay.
My bad. We could leave this part, right? Yeah. Because this is actually what makes sense, right? But again, that's something that an implementation could choose, right? Because it knows the device, and so this is specifically for redfish. For I don't know what happens in the case of Atran, right? But I would assume a similar thing, because none of the, at least my understanding is, none of the implementations would directly send the UUID to the device saying that, okay, I want information on this UUID, which basically would mean that the UUID needs to be absorbed within the device manager and it needs to be used in a mapping table, which we could completely avoid if we use the name.
Yes, you're totally right. And I mean, I'm currently only thinking about this because I'm implementing the device manager. So we don't have a device manager. This is something we implement, and I have to map all the interface to something. So our device is based on a netconf Yang. So it's a Yang model, and we use names and everything and hierarchies. So like here, I mean, you could also have a RESTconf interface instead of netconf interface, and you would also see the same structure basically. So this is fine, but then do we need a UUID for this? I mean, wouldn't it be better to just use a name instead of the UUID?
See, the thing is, the UUID is something that could be used by northbound systems, right? So as in, it doesn't harm. You don't act on the UUID, right? You can act only on the name, but you just pass it back when you return the API.
You mentioned earlier that the name is read-writable, which implies something can change it. So if you, in your implementation, rely on that hierarchy and something changes it, how's that going to affect?
Yes, so that is very correct, David. And I really can't figure out the use case or why it is read-write. So if you look at something like this, right? If you were to change that, so for example, okay, if you look at the spec, right, it says, okay, this is a fan, Let me just give me a second. Let me just try to bring up. There are certain aspects of the RFC which is really not understandable to me. So, for example, it says that the class of a component is read-write. But how can you change the class of a component? You cannot say that a fan becomes something else.
It's an existential question.
Yes, so truly speaking, I don't know why, how you can change the name, because if the name is something that the device generates, then I don't know how you can change it. So
did they
yeah,
give any examples of names in this spec?
No. The only thing that they I really could not find that, but the only thing that they talk about here was somewhere I saw that they said that the name is what they used to. Yeah, so each component in the list is identified by its name. This is the only thing that it says.
Yeah, I mean, in past work where hierarchical naming was used, the issue was always when a component moved from one place to another, right? Then you're essentially saying its name is changed, and that may be fine in this case, but that's just the thing. One thing to consider. If we expect external systems to use UUIDs, then we're going to have some mechanism to retrieve an entity via the UUID as well.
So can I come again, David, on the last point?
You had mentioned that external systems might store the UUID instead of the hierarchical name.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that external system needs to be able to query by that UUID too, and not just the name. So pull from the device manager, say, give me the information for this UUID.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, so on the API, what we have right now is that we are passing both the name and the UUID.
Both
Right? So,
the name and the UUID to the device
yeah.
manager.
Yes. So the API.
I guess if the hierarchical name is unique within a device, you kind of need the base device, a pointer to the base device plus a hierarchical name will get you what you want.
Yeah. So here, if
Okay.
you see, we have both. So we have the device UUID,
Yeah.
right, and the component name. So the device UUID plus the component name definitely makes it unique across the system.
Yep.
Or you have the component UUID as well, right? So we have both the options available. So you could query on either, or you could pass both. And similarly on the returns, right? So
in theory, though, if I'm querying by the component UUID, it's globally unique. So that would be all I have to specify, i.e., I either specify a component UUID or a device UUID and a name.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that really the device will be addressed by UUID, and underneath it, each component will be addressed by name. At least that would be my expectation, but I'm not really sure of it.
That's I kind of agree with that. It seems a weird mix to say, look, I'm going to go for a UUID without, a device UUID. I guess it seems to.
Yeah. So we could take this out. But just give me a second. Where's the
And
rest?
can we, is there any way to communicate with the authors of the spec to see if we can get some clarification on the intent? I don't know if they have a verification test suite on the for specs or not.
Hmm. Huawei Technologies, Tail of Systems. Yeah, maybe we can figure out a way of doing that.
We can also document what we just discussed and say you address a device by UID, you address a component within a device by name, because that's how the hierarchy goes, and we're done with it.
Yep. Like,
Yeah, so I think what I would propose for now is that we take out the component UUID in the get and set requests.
okay.
Agreed. And please then at the same time document this, meaning that you're going to use a device UID and then for anything underneath it, a component name. Okay?
Yep. Okay.
Let me write this down in our agenda.
So I have one comment on this though, that if we look at the metrics and the events that are generated or that are dumped onto the bus, there we have the component UUID and the component name as well. So do you think we need to take it out from here as well? Because I would prefer to have this here because this might make things much easier for not-bound components, or else they again need to work on a component key of the device UUID plus component name.
I thought kind of what we talked about earlier was, look, the ID, UID, if a component by its device UUID and a component name. And so that is the ID. So component UUID is kind of redundant.
Yeah, but this is something that is there in the model, right? It's redundant, but
Yeah.
it would be there. So would it make sense to output it in the events and the metrics?
Well, the problem is the minute you output it in an event, you got to output it. You got to also allow it as a get, right? I think it's one of those things. You either put it everywhere or you put it nowhere. And I can see arguments on both sides of it.
Because see, you can't get by the UUID, the component UUID, but when you do a get, right, you would get back. So when you do a get, so what you get back is a component, right? And the component has the UUID.
Right, but what value is the UUID in event if I can't also go get the component by the event, the UUID?
I see your point. I see your point, but the way I'm looking at it is that does it help? See, because the UUID would be used by not-bound systems is what I am assuming.
Why? I can't do anything with it. I can't get by it. I can't set by it. If I need a key for an external, some other thing, I've got one, device UUID plus a path, right?
Yeah, so that's what we're saying, that instead of using a compound key, which is basically using the tool, right?
Right.
This one is already available, so why not use it?
What am the question is, what am I going to do with it though? because if I'm gonna, I can't really index anything by the UUID because eventually I'm gonna have to get to the component key anyway if I'm gonna do a get or a set. I'm struggling to see the advantage of having, having the system, the device manager, give me a UUID for a component if I can't do anything with it. You know, in the long run, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, I completely understand your point, David. The thing is, then, doesn't the UUID actually doesn't even make sense in the model? Why do we even need the UUID?
Well, yeah, and that's why I was trying to figure,
Yeah.
get back to the authors to understand their intent.
It does for the device, I think.
For the device, yes.
For the subcomponent, I guess not really, not fully, unless somebody wants to keep an external database of every component.
But again, even if they keep an external database of every component, they're eventually going to have a mapping from that to the device UUID in the past, right?
Yeah.
So again, I'm not. It's not. I don't have a strong objection here. I really don't care in the long run. It's just another piece of data to keep in sync if we have it. That's why I'm really curious what the authors of the spec kind of intended here.
Okay, so yeah, let's try to reach them and see why they wanted to have both these things, right? So what I will do is, for the moment, definitely I will take it out from the get and set requests that will have only the device UUID and the component name. But I would leave it for the moment on the events and metrics. And once hopefully we hear from them and get a clarification what the intent is, I'll go ahead and do it from there.
By the way, do you guys know how to generate this UUID? I mean, it may sound like a stupid question, but I mean, I think we talked about that. Probably for the device, we will use a serial number to generate it. If you have a fan, for example, and you replace a fan with a new fan, is it the same UUID or is it a different UUID? Or if you have an SFP or something?
It should be a different one. It should be a different one.
Different one.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because
I agree. It should be a different one. It's a software generated UUID. UUID has a specific format, so I'd even be worried about saying I'm going to use a serial number as a UUID. It's a generated number.
Yeah, so not use the serial number as a UUID, but use the serial number to generate the UUID.
This is what I meant, yeah. And I was thinking about, for example, to generate a UUID for fan number 1, I would simply use probably the serial number plus fan number 1 to generate a UUID for it.
Why aren't we just doing a software generate a standard UUID format, which is essentially a random ID?
The only reason is that we want the across restarts the UUID to be the same. So rather than being random, if we use some seed, which remains same.
I guess the question is, if you
is unique,
is this persisted?
No, it's. I don't think it's persisted. I think what Amit is suggesting is, at least for the device, or really for anything, seed the algorithm in a way that you obtain the same UUID.
So David, basically what we're saying is that this UUID has to remain the same across restarts, right? We're not mandating that, yes, this is how you need to do it, right? You could use, as an example, what we're saying is you could use the serial number so that it remains the same, or else in your device manager, if you're going to use a backend database and you want to persist it, you're welcome to do it that way as well.
Okay, I get what you're going. I guess I was assuming there was some persistence behind here, so there was already a UUID would survive a restart. Okay.
Yeah. So Holger, you could look up, I don't remember the name of the module, but in Golang there is a module for UUID, and there you could pass a byte array, and if the byte arrays are the same, it would return you the same UUID.
No, yeah, thanks. This is fine. I mean, there's I think there's one module from Google which does this. I was just thinking about the example if you replace a fan, currently I was thinking about using, for example, the serial number as a seed to generate UUIDs for this specific device, and then I could use something like fan1 plus serial number, and then I would use this Golang package to generate a truly nice UUID. But this is what I'm currently thinking of.
But if I swap out a fan, and if I swap out a fan, do I expect a new UUID? It's not the same device. It's not the same component.
Yeah. Does every fan has something like a serial number or so, and you can query it in your system? I don't know.
Guess. Maybe not query it through the system, but you should be able to recognize that that is a new fan. Otherwise, how do you trigger like alarms or things like that?
Yeah, if it's not there, then you will have an alarm. But
right.
I don't know if you have a CPU fan, or I mean a fan on your CPU or something. Do you really have a serial number? Can you read that, or it's just a? I'm sorry.
One could also say that if there is no way you can seed the algorithm properly, I expected that given what we discussed, the device ID will be the same across restarts because you seeded with the device serial number, and that's something we are sure we can get. But the components UUID, given the fact that we address the components by their name, we can live with a non-seeded UUID. You might not be able to detect a change in, say, a fan. If a fan swaps in and out, you might not be able to detect that if you cannot read the serial number out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Andres, I've given the share back to you.
Yes, I was just taking a few notes on what we were just discussing. So the serial number of the device is the seed to the UID. If I think this needs to be documented. If a component has available, okay, perfect. Amit, I think I'll create a Jira story and put this to you. Okay. So that was all I had on the agenda for today. Anything that anybody wants to bring up while we are here together that needs to be discussed? Okay, I guess that's a no. Then if not, I think we can proceed as we were going with this. Amit, you can document things. The last point that was brought up last week, forgot, is this pawn receive power. I have not brought this up with Girish nor the the Ball Brigade. Unfortunately, did not have time. There were more pressing issues within BAL and within and for Girish and myself to take a look at. So I remember this. It's just that at the moment, this took a little, was put on the back burner for more important things. But I'll put a note here to remember it for next time. And whenever we get some spare time, most likely after 2.4 release, we can have a discussion with the BAL Brigade about this. Make sense? Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Andrea.
Yeah, sure. It makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Anything else that you guys want to bring up? Okay, then if not, I think we can get 10 minutes back of our day. And happy Friday, everybody, and enjoy your weekend tomorrow and Sunday. And I'll talk to you next week. If there are any questions, thoughts, as usual, Slack is the place, or Jira. And please do keep an eye out for the reviews that Amit is putting out. And if you have any comments, please do put them on there. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.